A simple act of kindness. 8-year-old Trey Anderson tightened his shoelaces as he looked out the window at the gray clouds that blanketed the city. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Trey's mother, Alicia, worked hard. Sometimes too hard, he thought, but always with a smile and a warm hug waiting for him after school. For as long as he could remember, it had just been the two of them since his dad had passed away. Today, though, felt special. Trey had saved up a few dollars, stashing coins and crumpled bills in an old shoebox under his bed. It wasn't much, but to Trey, it felt like a small treasure. The money had come from small errands he'd run around the neighborhood, helping Mrs. Chan carry her groceries, sorting recycling for Mr. Rodriguez, and shoveling snow for the Thompsons during winter. His mother had told him countless times that he didn't need to help with bills or save up for her. "Your job is to be a kid," she'd say with a soft smile, ruffling his curly hair. But Trey couldn't shake the feeling that, as her only son, he needed to help, even if just a little. Trey's eyes landed on his father's old police badge, now nestled next to his small collection of toy cars on his bedside table. Though it was only a replica, his dad had kept it as a reminder of his dream to become a police officer. That dream had always stayed with Trey. He, too, wanted to serve and protect others one day. Alicia had often told him stories of his father's kindness and bravery, of the countless ways he would help neighbors, strangers, and friends alike. As Trey slipped on his jacket, he called out to his mom, who was in the kitchen preparing a quick breakfast before her shift. "Mama, I'll be home early today." Mr. Rodriguez said he might need help again with the recycling, Trey said, peeking around the corner with a hopeful grin. "All right, but don't wear yourself out, sweetheart. You know I don't want you to work too hard," Alicia replied, placing a plate of toast and eggs on the table for him. Her eyes lingered on him a little longer than usual, filled with a mix of love and concern. Though she tried to shield Trey from their struggles, the signs of weariness showed on her face. Despite her double shifts at the diner and late nights working as a cleaner, Alicia's heart never wavered. She was determined to make life better for her son. After breakfast, Trey stuffed his saved-up bills and coins into his pocket, feeling a little nervous yet excited. He had a plan. There was a small diner not far from his school where police officers often gathered. Sometimes, Trey would watch them through the window, marveling at their uniforms and the way they seemed to carry themselves with a quiet strength. Today, he would do something he'd been dreaming of. He was going to buy them dinner. As he walked to school, Trey's mind drifted to the story his mom had told him countless times. The story of his dad seeing a police officer help an elderly woman who had fallen on the sidewalk. He didn't just help her up, his mother would say with a soft smile. He walked her all the way home, carrying her groceries. And the next day, he went back to check on her. It was that act of kindness that had sparked his father's dream of joining the force. Trey clutched his dad's badge in his pocket, feeling a surge of warmth. "I'll do it for you, Dad," he whispered. When school let out that afternoon, Trey headed straight to the diner. It was small, with a neon sign that flickered on and off, casting a warm glow on the damp street. Inside, the familiar faces of the neighborhood officers sat around a table, looking worn but laughing softly as they shared stories from their day. Trey's heart raced as he approached the counter, his small hands fumbling with his crumpled money. "Excuse me," he said, barely above a whisper. The waitress, a kind woman named Linda, leaned down to meet his gaze, her eyes softening as she recognized him. Trey cleared his throat, trying to sound grown-up. "I'd like to buy dinner for those officers over there." Linda's eyebrows lifted in surprise, and she glanced over at the officers, then back at Trey. "That's very sweet of you, honey, but are you sure?" Trey nodded, holding out the few dollars he had saved. "My dad wanted to be a police officer, and, well, I thought maybe this would make him proud." Touched, Linda smiled, gently taking the money from his hand. She added a few extra dollars from her own tips, ensuring there was enough for a full meal. "All right, sweetheart, I think he'd be very proud. As Trey watched from a distance, the waitress brought over plates of food to the officer's table. She nodded in Trey's direction, explaining who the gift had come from. The officers turned, their faces filled with gratitude as they looked at Trey, who gave a small, shy wave. One of them, Officer Morales, approached Trey and knelt down to his level. "Thank you, young man," he said warmly. "That was very kind of you. Your father must have been a great man." Trey nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. He wanted to help people like you do. Officer Morales placed a gentle hand on Trey's shoulder. "Well, you're already following in his footsteps. Keep being the good person you are. The world needs more kindness." After a few more exchanged words and smiles, Trey left the diner, feeling an overwhelming sense of warmth. He walked home with a renewed sense of purpose, not just for himself, but for his father's memory. Back at the apartment that night, Alicia came home to find Trey already asleep, his father's badge clutched in his hand. She knelt by his bed, her heart swelling with pride as she watched her little boy. She knew that life hadn't been easy on him, but he was growing up with a heart as big as his father's. The following day, as sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of their apartment, Trey heard a soft knock at the door. Alicia, wearing her diner uniform, opened it to find a group of police officers standing outside. She looked at them, puzzled, then back at Trey, who peered out from behind her, eyes wide with curiosity. Officer Morales stepped forward, a warm smile on his face. "We came to say thank you again for last night, Trey. And, well, we have a little surprise for you." Alicia's hand went to her mouth as she listened, her eyes welling up with tears. Trey's heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. He hadn't expected anything in return. It was a small gesture from him, an act of kindness in honor of his father. But now, standing before him was a group of officers who had been touched by his generosity, and they had come with something more than just words of gratitude. "Are you ready to see what we brought?" asked Officer Morales, kneeling down beside Trey with a smile. And in that moment, Trey's world was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. A promise and a gift. The soft knock at the door echoed in Trey's small apartment, and he held his breath, clutching his mother's hand, as they both stared at the police officers standing outside. Alicia's face showed a mix of surprise and confusion. She hadn't expected to see this group of officers at her door on an ordinary Tuesday morning, and certainly not with the expressions of kindness and admiration that they wore. Officer Morales, who Trey had met at the diner the night before, stepped forward and offered a warm smile. "Good morning, Ms. Anderson. We're sorry to show up unannounced, but we wanted to thank Trey again for his kindness last night." He looked down at Trey, his eyes sparkling with respect and warmth. "Young man, you've got a good heart. There aren't many people, especially so young, who would give what little they have just to make someone else's day better." Trey glanced up at his mom, his cheeks turning pink. He hadn't expected any of this. Buying the officers dinner was just his way of honoring his dad. But now, here they were, treating him like he'd done something amazing. Alicia, still recovering from the surprise, put a hand over her heart. "Officer Morales, this is so unexpected. Trey doesn't usually, well, he didn't do it for attention. He just wanted to. Well, to do something good, just like his dad would have wanted." One of the other officers, Officer Grant, stepped forward, holding a small box. "We know that, ma'am. And that's why we wanted to bring something special for Trey. It's a small gift from all of us, to say thank you for reminding us why we do what we do." With a nod of encouragement from his mom, Trey reached out and took the box. It was wrapped in simple blue paper, tied with a small piece of twine. He carefully unwrapped it, his hands trembling slightly as he pulled back the paper. Inside the box was a brand new set of toy police cars, each one detailed and carefully crafted, complete with the names of local officers painted on the side. Trey's eyes widened in awe. His own small collection at home was worn and chipped, with the paint fading from years of love and play. But these cars were perfect, each one a symbol of the officers who served his community. But there was something else, a small badge, almost identical to the replica his father had kept. It gleamed in the morning sunlight, and Trey's breath caught in his chest as he lifted it from the box. The badge was engraved with his name, Trey Anderson, followed by the words Honorary Junior Officer. "Wow," Trey whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." Officer Morales knelt down beside him, a gentle hand on Trey's shoulder. "There's nothing you need to say, Trey. You're a part of our community, and you're already one of us. This badge isn't just for show. It's our way of saying that you've earned our respect, and you'll always have a place with us." Alicia wiped a tear from her cheek, her heart swelling with pride as she watched her son cradle the badge. The weight of their gratitude and kindness filled the small apartment, and for the first time in a long time, Alicia felt a sense of peace, a feeling that despite the hardships, they were going to be okay. "We know things have been difficult for you both," Officer Morales continued, his voice soft yet filled with sincerity. "So we also wanted to offer something else, a little bit of help, if you're open to it." Alicia's eyes widened. "Help? Officer, we appreciate your kindness more than you know, but..." "Ma'am, we know you're too proud to ask," Officer Grant said with a warm smile. "And that's why we're offering. We've all talked it over, and we'd like to cover your electric bill for the next few months. And if Trey ever wants to visit the station, we'd be honored to give him a tour." Trey's face lit up at the mention of visiting the station. He had always dreamed of seeing what it was like inside, imagining the bustling activity and the camaraderie of the officers working together. But his mom seemed hesitant, her pride tugging at her sense of gratitude. "We don't want to impose," she began, her voice wavering. Officer Morales held up a hand, his eyes kind. "Ms. Anderson, I want you to know that this is a gift, freely given. Trey's kindness last night reminded us of the best parts of this job. He's inspired us, and it's the least we can do to repay that." Finally, Alicia nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you. I don't know what we would have done without you all. You've been so kind." As the officers shared a few more words, Trey could hardly contain his excitement. The idea of visiting the police station and getting a tour felt like a dream come true. His father's legacy, the stories his mother told him. And now this, an honorary badge, a gesture of respect and encouragement. It was more than he could have ever hoped for. After the officers left, Alicia pulled Trey into a tight hug, her hands brushing his curls as she held him close. "I am so proud of you, Trey. You've made a difference, just like your dad would have wanted." Trey hugged her back, a warmth spreading through his chest. "I just wanted to help Mama and make Dad proud." Alicia's heart swelled as she looked into her son's eyes, seeing both his innocence and the strength of his spirit. She knew that life hadn't been easy, but seeing the way Trey was growing into the best parts of his father was a gift she cherished deeply. The next day, Trey could hardly sit still in school, counting down the hours until he could finally visit the station. When the final bell rang, he dashed home, grabbing his honorary badge and meeting his mom, who was waiting to walk him to the station. As they approached the building, Trey's excitement only grew. The police station was bustling with officers, dispatchers, and civilians coming and going. Officer Morales greeted them at the entrance, a wide smile on his face. "Welcome to your station, Trey. Today, you're our junior officer in training." Trey felt a surge of pride as he followed Officer Morales through the station. He saw the dispatch room, where voices buzzed through radios and screens blinked with important information. He saw the holding cells, which made him shiver a little, but Officer Morales explained that they were there to keep everyone safe. Finally, they'd reached the main office, where several officers had gathered to greet him. Trey's eyes sparkled as they handed him a small police notebook and pen, just like the ones real officers used. "Now, Trey," Officer Morales said, smiling down at him, "every officer has a duty. It's not just about the badge or the uniform, it's about making the world a little better. And sometimes, That starts right in your own neighborhood. Trey nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of those words. He thought about his dad, about the stories his mom had shared, and about the way his dad had always wanted to help others. Trey promised himself that he would carry on that dream, no matter where life took him. As they left the station that evening, Trey's heart was filled with a sense of purpose. Alicia looked down at her son, seeing both the boy she loved and the young man he was becoming. She knew that life would still hold challenges, but with the kindness and support of their community, and the strength of their own bond, she felt ready to face whatever came next. And as for Trey, he knew that his father's dream was now his own. An unexpected call to duty. The following weeks felt like a whirlwind to Trey. Since his honorary title as junior officer, he'd visited the station a few times, each trip more thrilling than the last. The officers had welcomed him with open arms, even giving him small tasks around the station, organizing files, refilling supplies, and occasionally getting to sit in the front seat of a parked patrol car while they explained how the radio worked. Trey cherished every moment, feeling as though he was finally fulfilling his father's dream in his own small way. One crisp afternoon after school, Trey was helping Officer Grant organize paperwork in the front office when an urgent call came over the radio. Trey's ears perked up as he caught fragments of the dispatcher's voice. Suspicious activity near the old warehouse on Jefferson. Possible break-in. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions turning serious. Officer Morales, who was in the office with them, quickly clipped his radio onto his belt and turned to Trey with a reassuring smile. "Looks like we have to respond to a call, Junior Officer. We'll be back soon." Trey nodded, watching as the officers moved with swift, calm precision. He felt a mixture of awe and anxiety, his small hands clenching the edges of his honorary badge. For the first time, he was seeing the reality behind the badge, the moments of urgency, the weight of responsibility. He looked up at Officer Grant, who paused by the door and placed a gentle hand on Trey's shoulder. "You keep holding down the fort here, all right? We'll be back in no time." With that, the officers disappeared through the door, leaving Trey alone in the quiet office. He glanced around, the familiar space feeling different without the officer's presence. Despite the stillness, a strange sense of anticipation buzzed in the air. Trey sat at the desk, picking up a notepad and doodling small drawings of police cars and badges. After a while, he looked out the window, watching the world outside as people went about their day, unaware of the officers heading off to protect them. He felt proud to be a small part of this world, even if his role was just honorary. He understood now, more than ever, the commitment and courage it took to wear the badge. Minutes passed, turning into what felt like hours, though it was likely only 30 minutes or so. Suddenly, a sharp knock on the office door made Trey jump. He turned, expecting to see Officer Morales or one of his colleagues back from the call. Instead, a tall man stood in the doorway, looking disheveled and a little lost. Trey recognized him. It was Mr. Daniels, an elderly neighbor who lived a few blocks away and often wandered the neighborhood with his dog, Peanut. "Mr. Daniels," Trey asked, his voice cautious but polite. "Are you okay?" Mr. Daniels blinked, as if only now realizing where he was. He seemed flustered, wringing his hands as he stepped further into the office. I think something's wrong, young man. I was walking Peanut near the park, and I noticed a few teenagers messing around by the old community center. They looked like they were up to no good." Trey nodded, feeling a rush of responsibility swell inside him. Though he was just a junior officer, he knew this was the kind of moment where an officer would need to listen carefully and assess the situation. "Did they seem like they were causing trouble?" Trey asked, trying to remember how Officer Morales had once told him to stay calm and focused when someone reported something unusual. Mr. Daniels nodded. "They were spray painting the walls and breaking windows, and when I called out to them, they just laughed and ran off." Trey's mind raced. The officers were still out on a call, and there was no one else in the station. He knew he couldn't handle the situation alone, but he also didn't want to let Mr. Daniels down. Trey took a deep breath, remembering the emergency protocol Officer Morales had shown him in case he ever needed to contact someone. "Stay right here, Mr. Daniels," Trey said confidently. "I'll get someone on the line." He picked up the phone and dialed the emergency dispatch number, speaking calmly but with urgency as he relayed the information to the dispatcher. The dispatcher's voice was clear and professional, assuring Trey that help would be on the way shortly. "Thank you, Trey," the dispatcher said at the end of the call. "You handled that like a pro. Just stay put, and officers will be there soon." As he hung up the phone, Trey felt a surge of pride and relief. He turned to Mr. Daniels, who looked both impressed and grateful. "You did good, son. Your father would be proud of you." Trey's heart swelled at the words, but he kept his focus, just as he imagined his father would have. "I'm just glad I could help." A few minutes later, 2 officers arrived to speak with Mr. Daniels and gather details about what he'd seen. Trey watched them work, feeling a quiet satisfaction in knowing he played a small part in helping them respond quickly. When Officer Morales and the others returned from their own call, they immediately heard about Trey's quick thinking. "Looks like you're a natural, junior officer," Officer Morales said, clapping a hand on Trey's shoulder. "That was some impressive work." Trey blushed, looking down at his shoes but smiling. "I just did what you taught me, sir." The officers spent the rest of the afternoon talking with Trey, recounting stories from their days on the force, each one filled with the camaraderie and dedication they shared. Trey felt a warmth blossom inside him. It was more than just admiration. He felt a deep sense of belonging. That evening, when Trey returned home, he couldn't wait to tell his mother everything. Alicia was exhausted from her long shift, but she listened intently, her eyes shining with pride as Trey recounted his experience. "Oh, Trey," she said, pulling him close. "You handled yourself like a real officer today. Your dad would be over the moon to see how brave and responsible you've become." Trey's chest puffed out with pride, but he looked up at his mother, sensing a hint of worry in her eyes. "Mama, are you okay?" he asked gently. Alicia forced a smile, nodding. "I'm fine, honey. Just a little tired. But I couldn't be prouder of you. Every day, you remind me so much of your father." She leaned down and kissed his forehead, her hand resting on his curly hair. Trey could tell she was holding something back, an unspoken burden that weighed heavily on her shoulders. But he didn't press her, knowing that she'd tell him in her own time. The next day, Trey woke up to a surprise, a letter from the police department. Alicia handed it to him over breakfast, her eyes twinkling with curiosity as Trey tore open the envelope. Inside was an invitation to an award ceremony at the police station. The officers had nominated Trey to receive a Community Hero Award for his quick thinking and dedication to helping his neighborhood. Trey could hardly believe it. He stared at the letter, reading it over and over, his heart pounding with excitement. "Oh my gosh, Mama, they're giving me an award," Trey exclaimed, looking up at his mom with wide eyes. Alicia's face softened, and she smiled, though her eyes were misty with tears. "I'm so proud of you, Trey. Your father would be too." On the day of the ceremony, Trey and Alicia arrived at the police station, where a small crowd had gathered to celebrate his accomplishment. The officers greeted him with warm smiles and handshakes, each one congratulating him on his bravery and dedication. As he stepped onto the small platform, Trey felt a rush of nerves, but the sight of his mother's proud smile in the audience gave him strength. Officer Morales stood beside him, presenting him with a certificate and a small medal, both engraved with his name and the words "Community Hero." The crowd applauded, and Trey felt a wave of joy and pride wash over him. He clutched the certificate tightly, his heart full as he looked out at the people who had come to support him. "Thank you," Trey said, his voice wavering slightly as he addressed the crowd. I just want to say that I'm so grateful to be here. My dad always wanted to help people, and I'm trying to follow in his footsteps. Thank you all for giving me the chance to be part of this community." As he stepped down from the platform, Trey felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He knew that this moment would stay with him forever, a reminder of the love and support that surrounded him, the strength of his father's legacy, and his own growing resolve to make a difference in the world. And though he was only 8 years old, Trey knew that his journey was just beginning. Trials of the heart. The warmth of the award ceremony lingered in Trey's heart for days. His Community Hero Medal hung proudly in his room, next to his father's badge replica, a constant reminder of his growing connection to the father he barely remembered. For Alicia, however, each time she looked at that medal, it was a bittersweet reminder of both how proud she was of her son and how deeply she missed her husband. She knew Trey was growing up fast, perhaps too fast, and though she wanted to shield him from their struggles, it was becoming harder each day. Winter had set in, blanketing the city in a cold, sharp air. The old apartment seemed to let in every gust of wind, and Trey would often wake up to find his bedroom cold despite the layers of blankets Alicia carefully tucked around him each night. As their financial burdens mounted, Alicia had been forced to pick up extra shifts at both the diner and the cleaning service. Even with the help from the officers, the overdue bills, rising costs, and her own exhaustion weighed heavily on her. One evening, Trey arrived home from school to find his mom slumped over the small kitchen table, her head resting on a stack of bills. Her uniform was wrinkled and stained, and she looked paler than usual. Trey's heart clenched at the sight. He quietly set his backpack down and approached her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Mama," he asked softly, worry clear in his voice. "Are you okay?" Alicia jolted awake, quickly wiping away the few tears that had slipped down her cheek. She tried to smile, but Trey could see the weight of worry in her eyes. "Oh, Trey, I'm fine, baby. Just a little tired is all." Trey didn't believe her. He knew she was tired, yes, but he also knew that something deeper was troubling her. He looked down at the bills scattered across the table, the red overdue stamps glaring back at him like silent accusations. For a moment, he felt a pang of guilt. He wanted to do more to help, to ease her burden, but he was only 8. Still, he was determined to try. "Mama," he began hesitantly, "I know you don't want me to worry, but maybe I can get a part-time job. I could do more errands for Mr. Rodriguez or help Mrs. Chen more often." Alicia's face softened, and she took his hand in hers, squeezing it gently. "Oh, Trey, that's so sweet of you, but it's not your job to worry about these things. You're still just a kid, my baby boy. It's my job to take care of you." "But, Mama," Trey protested, his voice growing stronger, "I want to help. I don't like seeing you so tired and worried. We're a team, right?" Alicia's heart broke a little at his words. She knew he was too young to carry the burdens of adulthood, but she also knew how kind-hearted and determined he was. He truly wanted to help, just like his father had. With a sigh, she hugged him tightly, silently vowing to find a way to make things better. The next morning, after Trey left for school, Alicia sat down with a cup of coffee, staring at the worn photo of her husband on the wall. She remembered the dreams they had once shared, the plans to raise Trey in a comfortable home, to give him a life full of opportunity. Her heart ached as she thought of how much she was struggling just to keep the lights on. Alicia knew she couldn't keep working double shifts forever. The exhaustion was catching up to her. And even though the officers had kindly helped cover their electric bill temporarily, it wasn't enough to solve their long-term problems. As she sipped her coffee, she decided she couldn't wait any longer. Swallowing her pride, Alicia made a call to the local community center, hoping to find resources for single mothers and low-income families. The woman on the other end of the line was sympathetic and offered her a few suggestions. There were local charities that provided assistance for rent and food, and some even had counseling services for people facing tough times. Alicia listened carefully, taking notes and feeling a glimmer of hope. That same day, she decided to visit the community center after her shift at the diner. When she walked into the warm, welcoming space, she was greeted by a friendly woman named Mrs. Whitman, who listened patiently to Alicia's concerns and offered guidance on several programs that could provide relief. Alicia felt a weight lift off her shoulders, but there was still a lingering feeling of uncertainty. She didn't want Trey to know just how hard things were. She wanted him to keep his childhood innocence for as long as possible. A few days later, as Alicia was making breakfast, Trey noticed a flyer on the counter. It was colorful, decorated with stars, and the bold words, "Winter Coat Drive." Beneath that, it read, "Help us keep our community warm this winter." "What's this, Mama?" Trey asked, holding up the flyer. Alicia smiled softly. "Oh, that's from the community center. They're collecting coats for families who can't afford new ones. Winter's tough on everyone, and they're trying to help people stay warm." Trey's mind whirred with ideas. He remembered his own coat, which was a little too small and worn out. He'd been meaning to mention it to his mom, but didn't want to add to her worries. Now he thought of all the kids who might be without any coat at all, and wondered how he could make a difference. Later that day, during lunch at school, Trey shared the flyer with his best friend, Marcus. "I want to help," Trey said with determination. "Maybe we could do something to collect more coats. You know, ask people to donate them." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You really think we can do that? We're just kids." Trey's face lit up with an idea. "What if we ask the teachers to help? Maybe we could put up posters around school and tell people to bring in old coats. We can call it Coats for Caring." Marcus grinned, his skepticism melting into excitement. "Yeah, and we can ask the principal to make an announcement. Let's do it." The boys spent the next few days working on their project, making posters with colorful markers and writing messages encouraging people to donate coats. The principal was so impressed with their idea that she agreed to make an announcement over the PA system, asking students and their families to contribute to the drive. Trey felt a surge of pride each time he walked by the growing pile of donated coats in the school lobby. This wasn't just about making a difference. It was about giving back to the community that had helped him and his mother so much. Meanwhile, Alicia was starting to see small changes in her life as well. With the guidance from the community center, she was able to secure a small grant that helped cover some of her past due rent. She was also able to apply for a grocery assistance program, which meant they wouldn't have to worry as much about food. One evening, as she and Trey were sorting through the coats they'd collected, Alicia felt a profound sense of gratitude. She looked at Trey, who was carefully folding each coat and placing it in a box. He had grown up so much in the past few months, his heart full of empathy and generosity. Alicia marveled at his maturity and kindness, wondering if his father's spirit was somehow guiding him. "Hey, Mama." Trey's voice broke her thoughts. "Yes, baby." Trey hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the medal on his dresser. "Do you think Dad can see us? Like, does he know we're doing good things?" Alicia's heart ached, but she smiled, her voice soft and comforting. "Oh, Trey, I think he sees everything. And I know he's so proud of you. You're carrying on his dream every day, with every kind thing you do." Trey beamed, his worries melting away. He hugged his mom tightly, feeling a sense of warmth and love that erased the chill of winter outside. They were a small family, but they had each other, and that was all that mattered. When the coat drive ended, Trey and his classmates had collected over 100 coats. They helped load them into a truck to be taken to the community center, where they would be distributed to families in need. Trey watched the truck drive away, a sense of accomplishment and pride swelling within him. As the winter wore on, Trey and Alicia continued to give back to their community in small ways, whether it was volunteering at the community center, helping neighbors shovel their driveways, or simply offering a kind word to those around them. The kindness Trey had shown to the police officers months ago had blossomed into a deeper connection with his neighborhood, a bond that made him feel rooted and proud. But with spring on the horizon, Alicia knew that changes were coming. She had finally found a way to balance her work schedule and get the support she needed, but she wondered what the next step for her family would be. She looked at her son, her heart full of love and gratitude, knowing that they had both grown stronger through their trials. Unbeknownst to Trey, Alicia had been saving every extra dollar she could, hoping to give him a fresh start in a safer, more comfortable neighborhood. And as she looked at him now, her heart swelling with pride, she made a silent promise to herself. Whatever came next, they would face it together. A new beginning and an old promise. As winter turned to spring, the harsh cold gave way to the gentle warmth of the sun, and with it, Alicia's heart felt a flicker of hope that things were finally turning around. For the first time in a long while, she could see a future where she and Trey might find a little more stability and peace. The support from the community center had been a lifeline, helping her cover essentials and giving her breathing room to work toward a better life for Trey. She'd even managed to put a bit of money aside, each small deposit feeling like a victory. Alicia had been looking into new apartments in a safer neighborhood, dreaming of giving Trey a place where he could grow up without the constant worry of bills or the lingering weight of their financial struggles. Meanwhile, Trey was flourishing. He was doing well in school, fueled by the pride of his Community Hero Award and the admiration of his friends and teachers. He was no longer just the quiet boy who kept to himself. He'd become a leader among his classmates, someone they looked up to for his kindness and bravery. One evening, as they were having dinner, Alicia glanced over at Trey, watching him carefully nibble on his food. "Trey, there's something I want to talk to you about," she said, her tone gentle but serious. Trey looked up, his eyes curious. "What is it, Mama?" Alicia took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. "I've been thinking. You know how we've been in this apartment for a long time. It's been good to us, but I think it might be time for us to look for a new home. One with a little more space, maybe a yard for you to play in. How would you feel about that?" Trey's eyes widened, his face lighting up with excitement. "Really? We could move. Like to a place with a yard, and maybe even a tree." Alicia chuckled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Yes, maybe even a tree. Somewhere safe, where you can play outside whenever you want, and you don't have to worry about, well, the things we've had to worry about here." Trey's mind raced with images of a new home, a place where he could invite friends over without feeling embarrassed about the peeling wallpaper or drafty windows. But beneath his excitement, a tiny knot of concern formed in his chest. "But Mama, what about the people here? Mr. Rodriguez, Mrs. Chen, the officers. They've been so good to us. I don't want to leave them behind." Alicia's heart ached at his words, but she gave him a reassuring smile. "We won't be far, baby, and we can always come back to visit. Just because we're moving doesn't mean we're leaving the people we love behind." Trey nodded, comforted by her words. He couldn't deny the thrill of the possibility. A new beginning, a fresh start in a place where he and his mother could finally breathe a little easier. The next weekend, Alicia took Trey with her to visit a few potential apartments. As they toured each one, Trey's eyes sparkled with wonder. The spaces were brighter, with larger rooms and fresh coats of paint, nothing like the dim, worn-out walls of their old apartment. One of the apartments even had a small patch of grass in the back, just big enough for a garden, and Trey immediately imagined planting flowers and maybe even a vegetable patch. But it was the third apartment they visited that stole Trey's heart. It was on the second floor of a modest brick building, nestled in a quiet neighborhood lined with trees. When they walked into the living room, Trey felt an instant sense of warmth and peace. Large windows let in plenty of sunlight, illuminating the room in a golden glow. The kitchen was small but cozy, with clean counters and enough space for Alicia to prepare their meals without bumping into walls or cupboards. Alicia watched Trey as he explored, her own heart brimming with hope. This was the life she'd wanted to give him, a place where he could grow up in comfort and safety. "Mama, this one feels like home," Trey said softly, his voice filled with wonder. Alicia swallowed back a lump in her throat, nodding as she knelt beside him. "I think so too, sweetheart." After a few conversations with the landlord and some budgeting calculations, Alicia signed the lease. They would move in a few weeks, and she couldn't wait to surprise Trey with a small celebration on their first night in their new home. It felt surreal, like a dream coming true after so many years of struggle and sacrifice. In the days leading up to their move, Trey found himself walking through the neighborhood with a sense of nostalgia. He visited Mr. Rodriguez at his grocery store, helping him stock shelves and sweep the front steps as he had so many times before. When he told Mr. Rodriguez about the move, the older man gave him a warm hug and a bittersweet smile. "I'm gonna miss seeing you around, Trey," Mr. Rodriguez said, his voice gruff but affectionate. "You've been like a little helper for me, always lending a hand when I needed it. But I'm proud of you, Mio. You and your mama deserve a good place to live." Trey's chest swelled with pride as he hugged Mr. Rodriguez back. "I'll still come by sometimes, I promise. And thank you for everything." The following day, Trey stopped by Mrs. Chan's house, helping her carry groceries up the stairs. She had always been a kind presence in his life, her gentle encouragement and warm smiles making him feel safe and valued. When he told her about the move, she clucked her tongue, a mix of joy and sorrow in her expression. "You've grown up so much, Trey," she said, patting his cheek. "Your father would be so proud. But don't be a stranger, you hear? You're always welcome in this neighborhood." Trey promised her he'd come back to visit, his heart heavy but filled with gratitude. Saying goodbye to his neighbors felt like saying goodbye to a part of himself, but he knew that this change was for the best. On moving day, Alicia and Trey packed up their belongings, each box a testament to the life they'd built together in that old apartment. Officer Morales and a few of the other officers stopped by it to help them load the boxes into the small moving truck. Trey was thrilled to see them, and they shared stories and laughter as they worked together. Officer Morales pulled Trey aside before they left, handing him a small wrapped package. "This is for you, junior officer," he said with a wink. Trey opened it carefully, revealing a miniature police badge, this one inscribed with Honorary Junior Officer and a small engraving of the city's emblem. Trey's eyes filled with tears as he looked up at Officer Morales, who gave him a reassuring smile. "Just a little reminder that no matter where you go, you'll always be part of our family," Officer Morales said. "And remember, Trey, the badge isn't just about authority. It's about kindness, respect, and the promise to help others. You carry that promise wherever you go." Trey hugged Officer Morales tightly, his heart full of gratitude and admiration. "Thank you, sir. I'll never forget." With the last box loaded, Trey climbed into the moving truck beside his mom, glancing back at the old apartment building one last time. His heart was a mixture of excitement and sadness, but he knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter. When they arrived at the new apartment, Alicia held a small surprise for him. She had prepared a simple welcome home banner and set out their favorite snacks on the kitchen counter. Trey's eyes lit up as he walked into their new home, feeling the warmth and love his mother had put into this new beginning. They spent the evening unpacking, laughing as they arranged furniture and decorated their rooms. When they were finally done, they sat on the living room floor, eating peanut butter sandwiches and sipping hot cocoa, basking in the comfort of their new home. As they finished their meal, Alicia looked at Trey with a soft smile. "We did it, sweetheart. We made it. This is our new beginning." Trey's eyes sparkled with gratitude and pride. He leaned against his mom, resting his head on her shoulder. "Thank you, Mama, for everything." Alicia wrapped her arm around him, her heart swelling with love. "You've given me more than you'll ever know, Trey. I'm so proud of you." In that quiet moment, Trey felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. He knew that this new home, this fresh start, was more than just a place to live. It was a promise of the life he and his mother had fought for, a life where they could finally rest and dream again. And though his father was no longer with them, Trey felt his presence more strongly than ever. His father's dreams, his kindness, and his dedication to helping others lived on in him. With his mother by his side, Trey knew that he could carry forward the legacy of love, bravery, and compassion that his father had left behind. As they drifted off to sleep in their new home that night, Trey made a silent vow to honor his father's memory every day and to always hold true to the values he had learned. This was his new beginning, but it was also a continuation, a journey that he would walk with his mother and the love of his father guiding him forward. The legacy of love. The weeks after moving into their new apartment felt like a dream to Trey. The rooms were filled with light, and the soft, clean walls seemed to breathe a warmth that the old apartment had never possessed. Each morning, he woke up to the gentle rustle of leaves outside his window. And each evening, he watched the sun dip below the horizon from the small balcony where he and his mom would sit, sipping hot cocoa and sharing stories about their day. Their new home had quickly become a sanctuary, a place where both Trey and Alicia could finally relax and dream. Trey's pride in their new home was mirrored in his newfound friendships at school. The coat drive he'd organized with Marcus had left a lasting impression, and the other students saw him as more than just a friendly face. They saw him as a leader. Trey's teachers noticed his confidence, too, inviting him to participate in more school activities. It wasn't long before he was helping organize a canned food drive for families in need, leading a group of students as they worked to make a difference in their community. One spring afternoon, as he was packing up his books after school, Trey's teacher, Mrs. Ellis, approached him with a warm smile. She held a thick envelope with his name written in elegant script on the front. "This is for you, Trey. It's from the local community association. They were very impressed with the coat drive you organized, and they wanted to thank you personally," she said, handing him the envelope. Trey's eyes widened as he took it, feeling a mix of excitement and curiosity. "Thank you, Mrs. Ellis." She nodded with pride. "You've made a real difference, Trey. Keep up the good work. You have a bright future ahead." When he got home, Trey rushed to the kitchen where Alicia was preparing dinner. He could barely contain his excitement as he handed her the envelope. "Mama, look, the community association sent me something." Alicia dried her hands and took the envelope, her own curiosity piqued. She opened it carefully, revealing a handwritten letter along with a certificate and a gift card to a local bookstore. As she read the letter aloud, her voice softened with pride. "Dear Trey Anderson, we want to express our gratitude for your outstanding efforts in organizing the coat drive at your school. Your kindness and dedication have inspired those around you, and we are honored to recognize you as a young leader in our community. Please accept this gift as a small token of our appreciation." Alicia looked at Trey, her eyes shimmering with tears. "Oh, Trey, this is wonderful. I'm so proud of you." Trey beamed, his chest swelling with pride. "Thank you, Mama. I just wanted to help people, like Dad wanted to." Alicia knelt down beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Your father would be so proud of you, Trey. You're carrying his spirit forward in everything you do. You're showing the world the same kindness he believed in." Trey hugged her tightly, feeling a rush of love and gratitude. In moments like these, he felt as though his father's spirit was alive in their home, watching over them with a smile. With the gift card, Trey and his mom visited the bookstore the following weekend, where Trey selected a few books on police work, community service, and stories of young people making a difference in the world. He was particularly drawn to a book called Heroes Among Us, a collection of stories about ordinary people who had changed lives through acts of kindness and bravery. Alicia saw the spark in his eyes as he read, knowing that her son was not only absorbing words on a page, but shaping his own dreams. A few nights later, as Trey was reading one of his new books, there was a gentle knock on the door. Surprised, Alicia opened it to find Officer Morales and a few other officers standing in the hallway, each holding something behind their backs and smiling warmly. "Good evening, Ms. Anderson. We hope we're not intruding, but we wanted to come by and thank Trey personally," Officer Morales said. Alicia welcomed them inside, her heart swelling with gratitude. She knew how much these visits meant to Trey, who had looked up to the officers since he was little. Trey's eyes lit up when he saw his friends from the station, and he quickly set his book aside to greet them. Officer Morel's motioned to the items they'd brought. 2 large boxes decorated with blue ribbons. "We have a little surprise for you, Trey. You've been an inspiration to us, and we wanted to give you something to help you continue your journey." Trey's hands shook with excitement as he opened the first box, revealing a set of real police gear made just for him. There was a child-sized vest with his name embroidered on it, a small flashlight, and a notebook with a cover that read Officer Trey's Notes. He couldn't believe his eyes. It was as if he'd been given a piece of his father's legacy, made just for him. "Oh my gosh," he gasped, his eyes wide with wonder. "Thank you so much. This is amazing." Officer Morales smiled, his voice filled with warmth. "You're part of our family, Trey. This is just a small way for us to show you how proud we are of you." Then he motioned to the second box. Trey opened it, revealing a scrapbook filled with photos and handwritten notes from the officers and people in the community. Some pages had pictures of him helping at the station, others were of him during the coat drive, and there were even a few from the award ceremony. Each note was a message of encouragement and gratitude. Mrs. Chan had written about the kindness Trey had shown her. Mr. Rodriguez had shared how Trey's friendship had brightened his days, and even Mrs. Whitman from the community center had added a note about how Trey's dedication was a reminder of the goodness in people. Trey's eyes filled with tears as he looked through the pages, feeling an overwhelming sense of love and belonging. He glanced up at his mom, who was watching him with misty eyes and a proud smile. "Mama, look, everyone wrote something. I didn't know I made such a difference." Alicia hugged him tightly. "Trey, you have no idea how many lives you've touched. Your kindness is a gift to this world." Officer Morales placed a hand on Trey's shoulder, his voice gentle but filled with conviction. "You may be young, Trey, but you're already one of the best officers we have. You carry your father's legacy in your heart, and you're building a legacy of your own." Trey's heart swelled with a sense of purpose he couldn't quite put into words. He knew now, more than ever, that he was walking a path his father would be proud of, and that he had the support of an entire community behind him. As the months passed, Trey's bond with the officers and his community grew even stronger. He continued to help at the station on weekends, taking on small tasks and learning about the dedication it took to serve and protect others. The more time he spent there, the more he realized that his dream was not just about wearing a badge. It was about living a life of integrity, compassion, and courage. But Trey's journey wasn't without its challenges. One evening, as he and his mom were walking home from a visit to the community center, they came across a group of kids spray painting the walls of an abandoned building. Trey's heart raced as he recognized one of them, Jamal, a boy from his school who had been struggling since his own family had fallen on hard times. Trey knew he had a choice. He could walk away, or he could try to make a difference. Summoning the courage he'd learned from the officers, he approached the group, his voice steady but kind. "Jamal, what are you guys doing?" Jamal looked up, his face tense but surprised to see Trey there. "Just messing around. What do you care?" Trey took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "Because there are other ways to deal with things. You don't have to do this. If you need help, there are people who care about you." Jamal's expression softened, and the other kids looked at Trey, some nodding slowly. After a moment, Jamal sighed, lowering the spray can. I don't know what else to do." Trey placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I know things are tough, but you're not alone. I can help you, and so can the people at the community center." With Trey's encouragement, Jamal and the other boys agreed to go with him to the community center, where they were introduced to mentors and programs that could help them. It was a small victory, but it was a reminder to Trey that even the smallest acts of kindness could change someone's life. Over the years, Trey continued to make a difference, not only in his neighborhood, but in the lives of everyone he met. He grew into a young man of integrity, someone who others could rely on, and his dream of becoming a police officer only grew stronger. On the day he graduated high school, the officers from the station were there, along with his mother, who watched with tears of pride as her son walked across the stage. And when Trey took his oath at the police academy a few years later, he wore his father's badge replica over his heart, a silent promise to carry on the legacy of love and service that had been passed down to him. Years later, Officer Trey Anderson returned to his neighborhood, not as a child but as a young officer, ready to protect and serve the community that had raised him. And as he walked the familiar streets, he knew that every step he took was guided by the love of his mother, the memory of his father, and the unwavering support of those who had believed in him from the very beginning. Trey's journey had come full circle, and he was finally living his father's dream, a legacy of kindness, courage, and resilience that would inspire others for generations to come. Coming full circle, years passed, and Trey Anderson grew from a boy with big dreams into a young man living those dreams every day. He'd become Officer Trey Anderson, just as he had once imagined, with a real badge clipped to his uniform and the same commitment to service that had driven his father. As he walked the streets of his old neighborhood in his new role, he was no longer the quiet, curious child gazing up at police officers with admiration. He was now the officer that others looked up to, and he carried that responsibility with pride. One warm spring morning, as Trey completed his rounds, he was greeted by familiar faces and new ones alike. Mr. Rodriguez, now a little older with silver streaks in his hair, stood outside his grocery store, sweeping the sidewalk just as he had when Trey was a child. "Look at you, Officer Anderson," Mr. Rodriguez called, a proud smile breaking across his face. Who would have thought that little Trey would be walking these streets in uniform one day? Trey grinned, tipping his hat. "You were right about a lot of things, Mr. Rodriguez. You told me hard work would pay off, and it did." Mr. Rodriguez chuckled, his laughter as warm as the sun overhead. "I always knew you'd make something of yourself. You had a good heart, just like your father." They shared a few more words, and Trey continued his patrol, his heart warmed by the familiar faces and memories that shaped his past. Every building, every corner of the neighborhood held stories that he had been a part of, and it felt surreal to be back here, now as a protector and guide to the community he called home. That afternoon, as Trey returned to the station, he was greeted by Officer Morales, who had become something of a mentor to him over the years. Morales was older now, the lines on his face deeper, but his spirit was just as strong as it had been when Trey was a child. Morales had been there for Trey every step of the way, from his days as an honorary junior officer to his academy graduation, and he'd even stood beside Trey when he'd taken his official oath as a police officer. "Trey," Morales called, waving him over with a smile. "There's someone here who wants to see you." Curious, Trey followed Morales down the hall, passing familiar faces who greeted him with nods and smiles. When he reached the waiting area, he stopped in his tracks. Sitting on the bench, clutching a small, wrinkled hat in his hands, was Mr. Daniels, the elderly man who had been his neighbor all those years ago. Trey remembered helping him on numerous occasions, carrying groceries up the steps or making sure he made it home safely. Mr. Daniels had always been a bit of a loner, but he'd been kind to Trey, treating him like family when Trey had needed it most. "Mr. Daniels," Trey greeted him warmly, kneeling down beside the older man. "What brings you to the station?" Mr. Daniels looked up, his eyes twinkling with recognition. "Officer Anderson, huh? Well, ain't that something?" His voice was raspy but filled with pride. "I just wanted to come down and see it with my own eyes. You've grown up to be everything this neighborhood needed, Trey." Trey felt a lump in his throat as he placed a hand on Mr. Daniels' shoulder. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot coming from you." They talked for a few more minutes, reminiscing about the old neighborhood and the changes they'd both seen over the years. Mr. Daniels' voice was filled with nostalgia as he spoke about the days when he used to see young Trey running around the block, helping neighbors and dreaming of becoming a police officer. As they spoke, Trey noticed the shadows in Mr. Daniels' eyes, the weight of loneliness that often accompanies old age. He could tell that Mr. Daniels didn't get many visitors these days, and he made a silent promise to himself to check in on him more often. After all, Mr. Daniels had been a part of Trey's journey, another link in the chain of support that had helped him become who he was. When they said their goodbyes, Trey watched Mr. Daniels walk away, feeling a sense of responsibility for the older generation that had nurtured him. He understood now, more than ever, the importance of giving back, not just in big gestures, but in small acts of kindness and connection that made a world of difference. A few weeks later, Trey received a call while on duty that shook him to his core. It was from Alicia, his mother. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the urgency in her tone. "Trey, there's something I need to talk to you about. Can you come by the house after your shift?" His heart raced as he finished his patrol and made his way to the modest home Alicia had worked so hard to maintain over the years. It was the same home they had moved into when he was just a boy, the house that had represented a new beginning for both of them. When he arrived, Alicia was waiting on the front porch, her hands folded in her lap, and her gaze distant. She looked up as he approached, giving him a soft smile. "You're just like him, you know," she said, her voice gentle. "Every day, you remind me of your father." Trey sat down beside her, sensing the weight of her words. "What's going on, Mama?" Alicia took a deep breath, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a small, faded photograph. It was a picture of Trey's father in his security guard uniform, his smile wide and full of hope. Trey had seen the photo countless times, but something in his mother's expression told him that today it meant something more. "I've been holding on to something for a long time, Trey," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Your father, he left something for you, but I wasn't sure when the right time would be to give it to you. I thought about it when you graduated from the academy, but I guess I just wasn't ready." Trey's heart ached as he watched the emotions play across her face. "Mama, you can tell me anything. Whatever it is, I'm ready." Alicia nodded, taking another steadying breath before reaching into her pocket and pulling out a small weathered notebook. She handed it to Trey, her hands shaking slightly. "This was your father's journal," she said, her voice soft. "He kept it while he was training to become an officer. He wrote down everything, his hopes, his dreams, his thoughts about you and me. I've read it so many times over the years, and every time it brings me closer to him." Trey took the journal in his hands, feeling the worn leather cover beneath his fingers. He opened it carefully, the faint smell of old paper filling his senses. As he flipped through the pages, he saw his father's handwriting, neat and deliberate, detailing his thoughts on what it meant to serve, to protect, and to be a part of something bigger than himself. One entry caught his eye, and he read it aloud. "March 3. I don't know if I'll ever make it onto the force, but I know one thing for sure. I want my son to grow up in a world where kindness and justice matter. I want him to know that being a man isn't just about strength. It's about compassion and the courage to stand up for what's right. I hope, one day, he'll see that in me, and maybe, just maybe, he'll carry that torch forward." Trey's voice faltered as he read the words, and he looked up at his mother, his eyes glistening with tears. "Mama, he wanted this for me. He always did." Alicia nodded, her own eyes filled with tears. "Yes, Trey, he wanted this life for you, but he also wanted you to be happy, to find peace and purpose in what you do. And I know he'd be proud, so proud, to see the man you've become." They sat in silence, the weight of his father's words settling over them like a warm embrace. Trey felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that he wasn't just wearing a badge for himself, but for the legacy his father had left behind. Every step he took, every person he helped, was part of a larger journey that had started long before he'd even been born. That night, Trey took the journal home, reading each entry with a mixture of pride, sorrow, and love. His father's words were a beacon, guiding him forward and reminding him of the values he held dear. He knew that his father's dreams had become his own, and he made a silent vow to honor them with every choice he made. The following week, Trey took on a special project. Inspired by his father's journal, he organized a mentorship program at the station, bringing in young people from the neighborhood who, like him, had dreams of serving their community. He wanted to create a space where they could learn about kindness, courage, and the importance of giving back. As the program grew, Trey saw himself in the young faces that looked up to him. He shared stories of his journey, of the challenges he'd faced, and the people who had helped him along the way. He taught them about compassion, about the strength it took to serve, and about the legacy they could build through their actions. One afternoon, as he finished a session with the group, a young boy approached him, clutching a toy police car in his hand. "Officer Anderson," the boy said shyly, "do you think I could be like you one day?" Trey knelt down, his heart swelling with pride and hope. "Absolutely. You can be anything you want to be, as long as you remember that it's not just about the badge. It's about making the world a better place, one small act of kindness at a time." The boy beamed, his eyes filled with determination, and Trey felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had come full circle, carrying forward the love and guidance he had received, and passing it on to a new generation. In that moment, Trey knew that his father's legacy was alive, not just in him, but in every life he touched. He was not just an officer. He was a bridge between past and future, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of family. And as he looked out over the neighborhood he had once called home, Trey knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be, fulfilling the dreams of those who had come before him and inspiring those who would come after.